helps us to develop all kinds of new materials, medicines, and it helps us to push our knowledge forward.
The discoveries that we make on board the International Space Station then inform what we do on Earth, and it allows us to further both humankind here on Earth and get to further places in the universe.
So I've often been asked why we explore, and I think it's different for everybody.
When people are born, they naturally want to explore their environment, first as babies, and then as kids, and finally as adults. That's how we expand our world, and that's how we find something new.
Every time that we make a further step, we learn something and we learn how to adapt, and that is so important to humanity.
This is probably the main things which drives us forward and helps us to survive as a species.
There are so many unknowns in space, and as explorers and as humans, we want to find out what's in that unknown. For me, it's the fact that I get to be a small piece of figuring out what the unknown is and taking that next step to get to the moon and to Mars and the Artemis program.
Our ultimate goal is to go to Mars, but it's not an easy journey, and when we face a new challenge, we must solve it step by step.
I think that's one of the biggest benefits of the International Space Station. We're outside of the atmosphere, and now we don't have the protection of the atmosphere. What happens, and how do we better prepare our people, our hardware, our food, our water systems for that deep space exploration? It's really important on the space station that we learn those lessons now when we're in low Earth orbit. That way we know what we need to bring with us when we go onto the moon with the Artemis program.
One of the things that we do on the International Space Station is work with our international partners all across the world.
I think it's hard to overestimate the value of international cooperation in space exploration, because we all know that it takes much time and effort.
Space is hard, it's very challenging, and it's sometimes unpredictable, and that's why I think cooperation is the key to success.
The International Space Station wouldn't be international without all of our partners.
And our goal is to be a beacon of hope for all of humankind, so that people can look and say, this is what we can accomplish when we work together.
I asked Anne what she's most looking forward to, as well as Nicole, and she says it's really satisfying for her to work on hardware with her hands, then get it into the Japanese airlock, and then go see it working outside in space, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, that is one of the perks for sure. All the different things that we're doing every day, whether or not you're just being an operator or a subject for an experiment, loading up the Japanese airlock. That was one thing that we did several times during my mission, where we were deploying some small satellites via that airlock. So we did all the work of configuring them and putting them through, and then we watched them shoot out and be in orbit around Earth. So really cool.
That's pretty cool. That's neat. And Nicole said that she's looking forward to anything that has to do with fluid dynamics, because that's what she got her master's in. So looking forward to that. We got some social questions for you. You've been doing a great job for the past 4 hours answering them. Let's take a listen at this question, or rather I will read it and you can listen as we get your expertise while looking at a beautiful shot outside at Launch Complex 39A. The question from Oxidized 93 is, how do you brush your teeth in space?
Well, the short answer is just like you do on Earth, but a few nuances. You know, water behaves so differently when it's not falling down, so the surface tension is much more important. It keeps those water droplets together, so you can just get a small water droplet on your toothbrush, either before or after your toothpaste. Brush your teeth just like you do on Earth, and then no sink, unfortunately. So you got to figure out what to do with anything else that's in there. Some people might swallow it. I usually would spit mine out into a small wipe or a towel, and we have go through a few towels per week.
I favor the latter, like you. We have another question. Let's pop it up real quick. Peter Stefronic asks, do astronauts get any music played in the capsule before launch? Hold music.
Yeah, in the Soyuz we did for sure. While we had a long wait period, we had actually curated our own lists. We each contributed a few songs.
So 4.100.
SpaceX Dragon, go ahead.
We are continuing to track the hydraulics issue, and we'll provide an update as we get closer to LES arm. However, at this time, you are go for Section 5. When ready, report go for launch.
SpaceX Dragon, copy 4.100, Section 5 in work.
All right, you heard SpaceX update the crew there that they are still working on the hydraulic issue for the clamp arm, building their flight rationale. They'll have an update for them. We'll find out how they're going to proceed forward. But in the meantime, they're moving with the next milestone, getting ready to arm the launch escape system. Let's get out now to Megan Cruz, who is with a special guest at a nearby launch viewing location. Megan?
Hey, Daryl and Jessica. Yeah, you might be able to hear the crowd, but I promise you there is a big crowd here just off camera over here. And they're here on the 5th floor of a nearby building that really gives an incredible view of the launch pad just to the left of me. But yeah, let's introduce you to somebody that we have with us today. You know, there are people across Florida as well as Texas, California, all working the launch. And one of those folks is Mike Ravenscroft. He's with NASA's Commercial Crew program. And he just stepped off console a few minutes ago to be able to chat with us. It's really great to have you here, Mike.
Hello, Megan. I'm glad to be here. Thanks. Appreciate everything.
Crew is go for launch.
All right, Mike, I know.
Copy. Crew is go.
Mike, it says crew is go for launch. Why don't you talk to us about the issue with the clamp arms that we've been tracking? I think we just heard the decision about that issue with the clamp arms.
Yeah, so the team's been really hard at it. The SpaceX and NASA team's working hard on a ground hydraulics issue on the vehicle release system. So they've been actively working this. I think we just heard them talk to the crew and give them a heads up of the issue, and they're still actively working that. This is a concern basically of just how the vehicle is held in place and during release when the vehicle is at liftoff. So teams are actively working that, and hopefully we get resolution soon and can continue on with countdown.
And Mike, we just said that you stepped off console. What does that mean to be on console? And what is your team listening for, particularly with this issue that is currently being worked?
Yeah, so the team's looking for any issues with respect of how the performance is. They compare it to previous history. Was there anything abnormal from when we had static fire to today? And so they're off actively looking at that data, and between SpaceX and NASA teams discussing if we have a path forward and if we can continue and get resolution.
Okay. Well, Mike, why don't we let you get back on console? We know that, again, we are actively working an issue with your teammates there, so we really appreciate you being here. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Megan.
All right, guys, let us get another update with our SpaceX counterparts and our NASA counterparts over at Hawthorne.
Falcon 9 is the first orbital-class rocket capable of reflight. Together, Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy have completed more than 450 launches and over 380 reflights.
And today, the booster will be attempting to land at Landing Zone 1, which is just down the coast from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. This will be the second flight of the first stage booster supporting the Crew 10 mission.
Rapid reusability drastically reduces launch costs, helps increase launch frequency, and enables a wide array of new government, commercial, and scientific opportunities in space. Lowering the cost of access to space is helping take humanity's steps into the solar system, whether in low Earth orbit, interplanetary, or even deep space. When costs are lower, government and commercial customers can launch more missions, which helps accelerate development. This also helps commercial satellite and private research customers afford to launch more projects to space, which helps stimulate innovation here on Earth. All of this to say, reusability is the key innovation that is making space more accessible for the industry as a whole. And just like the first stage of Falcon 9, Dragon is also reusable.
The reusable Dragon spacecraft has flown people to the International Space Station 13 times. And as we mentioned earlier, today's crew will fly aboard the same Dragon that previously flew the Crew 3, Crew 5, and Crew 7 missions.
For more than a decade, Falcon 9 has supported 45 missions to the International Space Station with our Dragon spacecraft, starting with our first cargo resupply mission, then returning human spaceflight capabilities to the U.S., and even helping launch 2 additional cargo missions with Northrop Grumman's Cygnus.
All of these missions have enabled science and research to be conducted in low Earth orbit at the International Space Station. The space station also plays a key role in enabling a robust economy in low Earth orbit. In addition to supporting private astronaut missions, the station is open for commercial and marketing activities proposed by industry and is supporting commercial companies conducting research as well as in-space manufacturing initiatives and aiding the development of technologies for commercial space stations. As part of these initiatives, SpaceX has supported the next generation of commercial space exploration with the launch of 3 private astronaut missions to the station in partnership with Axiom Space, with a 4th mission slated for this spring.
But SpaceX's drive to unlock space does not end there. In 2021, SpaceX launched Inspiration 4 on a 3-day journey around Earth, and there you could see some of the footage from that mission on your screen. It was the first all-civilian mission to space, and missions like Inspiration 4, Polaris Dawn, and the upcoming From 2 allow commercial astronauts to conduct research and other activities in microgravity and demonstrate new technologies while orbiting Earth. As some of you may recall, last year, the Polaris Dawn crew reached the highest Earth orbit ever flown since the Apollo program, participated in the first ever extravehicular activity, or EVA, from Dragon wearing SpaceX-developed EVA suits, and conducted 36 research studies and experiments designed to advance both human health on Earth and during long-duration spaceflight. All of these missions are helping set the stage for future missions to the Moon, Mars, and beyond.
And for nearly 25 years, NASA has supported a continuous presence in low Earth orbit aboard the International Space Station. And just yesterday, the space station surpassed over 150,000 total orbits of the Earth. Now, NASA plans to transition to a new model featuring commercial space stations to ensure a sustained access to low Earth orbit for microgravity research. Our commercial low Earth orbit development program is using a 2-phase approach to first support the design and development of commercial space stations, and second, enable the agency to purchase services as one of many customers. Definitely exciting times ahead in the world of commercial space.
Absolutely, very exciting. Now, back to today's mission. We are coming up on T-minus 50 minutes here to launch, and our teams are carefully moving through the pre-flight process. Now, a lot of preparations have brought us to this point, including a dry dress rehearsal and static fire on Sunday. A dry dress rehearsal is a practice run before launch where all of the steps are conducted except for the loading of propellants, which is why we call it dry. The integrated spacecraft and rocket are rolled out to the pad and raised vertically, and the crew and all of the support teams go through their steps exactly how they would on launch day to make sure that they're ready when we do go for launch. However, during a static fire test, which we also did earlier this week, the crew is not present. Now, propellants are loaded and the engines on the boosters are fired for a few seconds while the rocket is held down to the launch mount. The data from the static fire test is then reviewed and incorporated into NASA and SpaceX's decision to proceed with launch.
And all of that hard work now brings us to today. And next up in our countdown, SpaceX's launch director will check in with the team for readiness, both for propellant load and for launch. As mentioned earlier, the Dragon launch team, as well as key NASA launch members, are in the Launch and Landing Control Center at SpaceX's Hangar X in Florida. The launch director will also check in with the Dragon mission director, referred to as MD, and NASA launch manager to make sure they're ready to move forward. Right now, the crew is on board Dragon, waiting to get the green light to stow the crew arm for launch and arm the launch escape system. Once the launch director gives the go-ahead, we should get a good view of the access arm moving away from the spacecraft. Now we're still tracking that one issue with the hydraulics, so we should hear the final decision on that before we get to that crew access arm stowage. And the range continues to be go for launch, currently monitoring the clearance area surrounding our launch pad, as well as the air and sea space along the flight corridor.
And the weather is also looking good so far. Weather is trending in the right direction, and we're currently at a less than 5% chance of violation at our target lift-on time, which is great. Our teams will continue to keep an eye on the weather, and we'll have our final pre-fueling weather briefing at about T-minus 45 minutes, which is just in about 3 minutes from now.
And there on your screen, you can see a live view of Falcon 9 and Dragon at the launch pad, Launch Complex 39A in Florida, just under 48 minutes away from launch. We've conducted several weather briefings leading up to this moment, starting with one at T-minus 48 hours a couple of days ago. proceeding into the most recent weather briefing a couple of hours ago. All of the weather continuing to look good, as Jesse mentioned. The one item they're currently tracking for weather, it would be on the abort corridor, but again, that looks pretty good at this moment. Again, our teams will be staffed around the clock in mission control to monitor Dragon, not just today, but through the entire mission from liftoff to Crew 10's arrival at the space station and all the way through splashdown when the astronauts return. Coming up in about 2 minutes, we should hear that launch director briefing around the T-minus 45-minute mark. And then after that, we should hopefully have a decision on the hydraulic system, whether we are go or not, and if that's been resolved. And then after that, we will see that crew access arm stow to begin around the T-minus 43-minute mark.
And as you mentioned, Anna, all the rest of the systems are looking really good for T0. We are just working this one issue as a ground side issue, but the vehicle is healthy, the crew is healthy. They're currently strapped into their seats inside of Dragon on top of Falcon 9 as we speak right now, patiently waiting for an update.
Yep. And once Crew 10 does get to the International Space Station, they will, of course, have a brief handover period with Crew 9. And then after that handover, once weather looks good for a splashdown, Crew 9 will return home shortly, bringing the end to their mission. So it's a busy time as we complete these crew rotation transitions at the International Space Station. Now at just under T-minus 46 minutes, so we should be coming up on that launch director briefing here shortly. Continuing to see a live look at the launch pad 39A at Kennedy Space Center in Florida. You can see the clear skies all around.
Dragon, LD on countdown 1.
LD Dragon, go ahead.
Hey, for awareness, team needs a couple more minutes here, wrapping up this hydraulics issue. We'll get back to you in about another 4 minutes or so on the answer.
Sudden copy, thanks.
And a quick update there. Sounds like around the T-minus 41-minute mark, we'll get an update on that hydraulic issue that the teams have been working. These views are great. Like Daryl said, we might have a nice twilight launch over there in Florida. So if anybody is in Florida and able to go outside during T0 for liftoff, you might get a really cool view of the launch tonight.
And again, that hydraulics issue that's been mentioned several times here now, the only issue being tracked, it's related to the hydraulics on a clamp arm. And those clamp arms are located on the transporter erector around the second stage of Falcon 9.
Dragon, SpaceX, LD on countdown 1. At this time, we are standing down from today to further address hydraulic release data.
And launch control is going to pause the clock.
SpaceX Dragon, we copy all. Spaceflight is tough. Humans are tougher. We'll be ready when the equipment is.
Yeah, sorry about the unfortunate result today, but we'll get you back up here in the air soon.
Dragon, copy all.
Dragon SpaceX, you are go to start 5.100 launch scrub.
SpaceX Dragon, 5.100 launch scrub and work.
And we did just get that update. Unfortunately, we are scrubbing for today's launch, unfortunately, due to the hydraulic ground issue that the teams have been working. This will allow the teams to continue to troubleshoot and hopefully fix this issue for the next attempt that we'll have for Crew 10.
Yeah, and there's several other attempts this week. We'll see where we end up, but there's another opportunity about 24 hours from now that they could potentially take if that issue is addressed. So from here, the crew and the team will have to begin egress steps to get the crew out of Dragon and off the launch pad and back to their quarantine facility in Florida, where they'll just get a little bit more time with their families.
Yeah, and the good part is we have not started loading propellants, so we don't need to offload any propellants. The vehicle is safe.
SpaceX will be in section 3 of 5.100. We'll be there. I expect that you should be standing by in step 3.2.
And SpaceX Dragon, copy. We are complete through 3.2, and we can give you 3.3 that we are ready for seat rotation.
SpaceX copies. Crew report ready for seat rotation, and 3.3 we'll report when we step into those ops.
And just some comms between the core and Crew 10. They are preparing for egress. You are going to hear some procedures being called out as they work through that egress procedure. And like we were saying, the crew is safe. The vehicle is safe. It was a ground side issue that they've been working, that the teams have been working. And so what we'll see coming up is the seats will rotate. We did have the closeout team already leave the pad. They're going to come back and help the crew egress the Dragon vehicle.
And there on your screen, you can see a live look at the crew and Dragon Endurance working through those steps. Leading up to the scrub today, they did go through lots of activities, obviously making it all the way through crew ingress, which happened around 4:58 p.m. Eastern earlier today. They then completed all of the suit leak checks, closed the...
And for crew awareness, proceeding into scrub site safing, expect some venting from the vehicle ACS system.
Dragon copies.
And continuing to hear that comm between the crew operations research engineer from SpaceX and Crew 10 aboard the Dragon Endurance. With that, we'll go ahead and turn it back over to Daryl at NASA's Kennedy Space Center for some additional information.
All right. Thank you very much, Jessica and Anna, back here at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Unfortunately, we're not going today, Jessica. There was an issue with the hydraulic system on the ground side out at Launch Complex 39A. This was an issue that involved one of the clamp arms on the transporter erector. This is a ground issue. Everything was fine with the rocket and the spacecraft itself. This was an issue that SpaceX first made the crew aware of at T-minus 4 hours. They were working it, gathering data, but continuing with the countdown in hopes that they were able to have enough data to resolve the issue or get comfortable with some flight rationale. They were unable to get to that point, but I was listening in on the nets, and they were definitely working this issue as thoroughly as you would expect from the teams at SpaceX and NASA, talking about all the information, previous launches, taking into factors data from even the test fire. But in the end, they were unable to get to that point where they were comfortable launching. So we stand down for today and we look for another opportunity, though at this point we know that there are two opportunities coming up on Thursday and Friday, but it has yet to be seen whether or not the teams will take that opportunity. They first must resolve the issue or get enough data in order to understand it. And then at that point, they can proceed with an opportunity. But just to make the audience aware of the opportunities that remain, on Thursday, we have a launch opportunity at 7:26 p.m. Eastern Time. 7:26 p.m. Eastern Time, there is another launch opportunity for a 24-hour turnaround. And then on Friday, as you know, Jessica, we move generally about 20 or so minutes back each day in order to rendezvous with the International Space Station. We have a launch opportunity on Friday as well at 7:03 p.m. Eastern Time. As you can see on your screen, the Crew 10, is getting ready to egress the spacecraft Endurance. This is where they will go ahead and get out of the spacecraft. They're in fact talking about that now as they are motioning which crew members will be going through. From here, as you heard mentioned by the commentators in Hawthorne, they will make their way down the launch tower into their vehicles, which are waiting them, along with the closeout crew, which will help them go back to astronaut crew quarters. For astronauts, though, Jessica, this is certainly something that is really part of the business.
Yeah, absolutely. We talked about it earlier, and flexibility is really the key to everything that we do as astronauts. We know that the plan is always changing, and launch scrubs are definitely a reality that we have seen happen over and over again here on the Space Coast. Way back in the shuttle era, of course, happened frequently too, given maybe a technical issue, maybe a violation of the range, as we talked about with a random boat being in the area. Maybe it was a weather violation, or even any of the contingency sites along the corridor as well. So lots of different reasons to abort. It does, we're ready for this. This is what we trained for. We know that at the end of the day, you may be lifting off, you may not be. Definitely a bummer for everyone involved, but we will just, again, do as we're trained and get ready for that next opportunity. It reminds me a little bit of an interview that Anne gave fairly recently about the mission, and she was talking about the extensive experience that her crew has in regard to aviation. We talked about that several times in this broadcast. They have 4 professional pilots, 2 military pilots, 2 commercial pilots. And one of the things that Anne often talks about is how important it is as an operator, as a test pilot, to be humble, because your equipment will always fail in ways that you don't predict. And I think that's something that we saw here today. There were other issues, technical issues, that were being worked and tracked before this mission, as there are all before every mission. We're always wondering what's going to happen with the weather here, which can be pretty interesting and unpredictable here on the Florida coast. But this was something I don't think that anyone was tracking at all. And Anne and I even spoke last night. It just seems like everything's going too smoothly. I think we mentioned that this morning as well. And maybe we shouldn't have said that out loud, because sure enough, there's always something that you don't expect. So I'm sure Anne's reminding her crew right now, hey, be humble. We know that today we weren't ready to launch. And the answer is that we will launch when we know we're ready and safe. And that's, of course, the only solution when you're launching humans into space.
And a hint that the crew is taking it well, as you said, that we just saw moments ago. Kirill Preskov appeared to use his tablet to take a selfie with the crew. So you feel like they're doing okay and certainly understand what is happening right now. They were aware throughout the countdown that this could be a possibility, but they get yet another practice run in at getting out to the launch pad and getting into their seats and preparing to go.
That's right.
We're listening in as SpaceX continues to go through their scrub procedures. Again, another highly detailed list of procedures to properly go about the scrub of a spacecraft launch. Coming up next is our crew egress. The crew has loosened up their seat
and
belts.
For crew awareness, there will be some additional tank venting here as we get back down to nominal tank pressures.
Copy.
From your time in the astronaut corps, what are some stories that you've heard from astronauts that have, spent time waiting for the next opportunity?
Well, there's certainly a lot of stories. I mean, there were some shuttle missions that scrubbed numerous times. I mean, over and over again. You have different launch windows for different vehicles, too. Sometimes it's an instantaneous window. Sometimes you have a prolonged period, so maybe you might be able to resolve a problem in time. But, in some ways, it could actually...